Tonight, I finally get to show you Veeam Endpoint Backup 1.1 running on the released version of Windows 10 Pro in this case. And what do we have here? Well, if I do start run WinVer, there's our Windows 10 and the build number, build 10240. How about start run or Windows plus R MS Info 32. So this is a 8-core Xeon processor, 64 gig of RAM, and a nice speedy SSD for my C drive. Let me give you a quick look at that, and then we'll get started with installing and using Veeam to completely back up this system and then restore it. So Veeam is on my 2 terabyte SSD. That's a Samsung 850 EVO. Okay, so now you'll see that this is an EFI system and an NTFS partition. So let's get started. The only thing I did was installed Windows 10, booted it, and fired up this browser page, the home page, to click on this article and show you how do you get started with this. So of course you'll want to download it to get started. So this article goes over the features and what's changed, but here's the download link we need. Okay, if you've never been to Veeam before, you'll want to create an account. If you've been there before, you sign in. So in my case, been there before. Now, if you just want to peek at what it looks like to create a Veeam account, not exactly difficult. That's all that's asked. So I've logged in, and now I have the download button. It's that simple, immediate, no email or waiting for a download button needed. So we've got the download cruising right along here. Quite speedy. And instead of just opening it, I want to show you the downloads folder. Okay, and we're done with the browser. Here it is. Such a fresh install that I haven't even turned on file extensions. There we go. So it's a zip file. You can just double click it, open it. There's an exe inside. Double click on that to get the installer going. Yes to user access control. And now it's just a routine install of the software. Okay, it's done with the install. Took a couple minutes. And it's saying, hey, do I want to back up to this USB drive that's attached? No, that's going to become my recovery media. So I have a 16 gig USB flash drive attached, but I don't want to back up to it. I'm going to back up to a network share. So I'm going to skip an initial backup to that drive and just go with clicking next. It says, would I like to create recovery media? I'm going to just cooperate and click finish. It's going to launch a wizard. It's looking for what's locally attached, and it found a D drive. I don't need to change any of these other settings. I can simply click next. It's going to include Wi-Fi or wired drivers, whatever's needed to restore this machine from bare metal later on if something bad happens. It's warning me my USB disk is going to be formatted. I click yes and wait. And click create. Now, while that's cruising along, there's a really nice feature here that you might not think about, and that is you can multitask. Let's imagine you're trying to back up a relative's machine, and you're at, I don't know, a holiday party, and you're backing up to a hard drive or over maybe Hamachi VPN to your home network, a network share. Either way, you don't want to hang around waiting for this media creation. You can get started with your very first backup right away. So I'm clicking on the tray icon, and if it's a power user machine like mine's going to be, I like to see that icon to see the status of the backup. There's a little blue thing telling me hasn't been configured, so I double click to launch the initial setup wizard. All right, so we got two things going on here. We've got the building going on, and we're going to now do the install. Media creation and install can easily happen at the same time. I'm going to do an entire computer backup. I had already mentioned a more typical approach to backing up many machines in a home network, maybe with multiple family PCs, would be a shared folder. And what is this shared folder? Well, let me throw a recommendation at you right there. I'm going to make a new one. All right, so on the Windows 8.1 machine that I'm recording this video on, I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder. Veeam Backups. Right-click it. Select Share With. We can say specific people. And then just hit Share. So on the private network that I'm on, it's now going to have a network share that this person can get to. All right, so on that Windows machine, we have a folder with that name. And in this case, it was Microsoft credentials. For a password, right? Trying to keep this video simple. We can test it by clicking the populate button. We'll then know if it can see the network share, and indeed it can. Not a lot of space left, but plenty for an initial install of Windows 10. So then click Next. Now at the bottom, it just says it finished recovery media, so we can close that. And let's continue with this configuration of backup. 12:30 a.m. or maybe you want to stagger these backups or just leave it alone. So 12:30 a.m. daily backups are going to happen. You have some options there you can go ahead and read about as well. And let's run the first backup right away. Now you might recall I just installed Windows 10 right before recording this video. So at the bottom right, you saw a warning from the operating system saying, hey, you're going to need to reboot, by the way. So the first backup is cruising along here. If we want to look under the covers just a little bit, we can always look at our friend Task Manager here, more details view, and see what is happening. Well, not much with the CPU so far, and a little bit with the Ethernet. So the backup hasn't really gotten underway yet. I'm going to go ahead and speed up this segment of video until we're done with this first backup that's going from one SSD to another over a gigabit connection, so it should be pretty speedy. Okay, it's like a minute or two later. You'll see it's surging forward here with the progress, and we're getting a nice solid 500 or 600 megabits per second. Also, I instantly got a little happy email welcoming me from Veeam Software and thanking me for downloading. So it won't be long now before this first backup is done. So let me give you a heads up on the planned next steps as this first backup wraps up. The next step will be a second backup. So much like a daily differential backup. To make it more realistic and not ridiculously fast, we know Windows updates had some stuff queued and waiting for a reboot. So what I might do between this first and second backup would be a reboot. But again, we haven't put a lot of data on here on the system. It's not really going to matter. Nevertheless, I can test that. This last 1% takes longer as it finishes whatever housekeeping it is doing. And we're getting a little warning about the target disk being a little low on disk space. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and cooperate. The nice thing about this server is I have this web UI that lets me show whatever's coming out of the VGA output. In other words, I can record video even while it's rebooting or applying these Windows updates. So you're now seeing a normal reboot of a Supermicro Super server here. And we'll just wait for that to do its thing. And I'll go ahead and free up a little more space too. Okay, it's a few minutes later because I wanted to clean up the disk a little, and it's rebooted. So let's get rid of that yellow bang. Let's do another backup by double-clicking on the tray icon. Backup now. And what it should see is that I'm no longer low on disk space. I'll go ahead and speed up this portion of the video recording until we're done with this second differential backup on whatever's changed since the first backup. Okay, I didn't have to clear the warning because it cleared it for me. I had to clear some space, and here's what a backup looks like. So now we're going to get into the weeds a little. A backup of plain old Windows 10 is 6.5 gig in size or so. And you'll see my C drive now has more than 10% available, so it's no longer complaining that I'm too darn low. I'm actually about to get rid of that SSD anyway. So, but yeah, normally you don't want to fill up a drive more than 90% if you can help it. Okay, so that went well. Now, what can we do to get into the weeds a little further? When I say into the weeds, well, if you have never done bare metal backup and restore, I'm about to show you how easy it is. And after that reboot, when I recover this machine, I'll then get into how the product works a little more under the covers, the pieces, memory use, CPU use. We'll dive right into that. So what do I want to do? Well, I want to show this machine is about to be rewound in time. So I'm going to do right click on the desktop, new, folder. All right, so we now have a folder called Hello World. Now we're going to rewind this machine in time by restarting it and booting off of that recovery media, that USB flash drive that we created. I want you to see that it's rather straightforward to maybe leave your family or friend's PC with a recovery media, meaning, hey, you've got your machine in trouble, go ahead and restore from either a network share or even a local drive maybe you back them up to. Maybe you buy them a 128 gig SSD and you back up to that, right? Either way, they need to have a way to recover. So I'm going to show you some ideas here on what that backup media you give that person might look like, that recovery media, that bootable device. Now, in my BIOS on the Supermicro, I was not paying close enough attention, so I need to reboot again. What I need to do is, I need to hit F11, so the alternate boot sequence. You need to specify, hey, for the next boot, I'm going to boot from this other USB device. So here's the article I was talking about and a handy way to label a flash drive you might leave laying around. It's very tiny. You can leave it installed in the machine, but of course the person whose laptop you're helping back up and stay out of trouble might not know enough to not accidentally delete everything on there. So you might want to kind of set it aside somewhere in their home. Okay, F11 for boot menu. And now it's going to let me specify something else besides my C drive to boot from, like the SanDisk. It said UEFI because I've got my BIOS in UEFI mode. Your experience may vary, depends on how modern your hardware is. Recap, you probably would like to read this article if you've never used Veeam before, and particularly what's come out new with the product since the 1.1 release came out that supports Windows 10. They've had 1.0 out since last October, I believe. All right, so the recovery environment is now coming right on up. It's very Veeam greenish. We're going to click on bare metal recovery. No, not we. I'm going to click on bare metal recovery as you're watching. And I'm then going to say network storage is where I want to fetch the backup from. Shared folder? Yeah. Same thing we typed earlier. Requires credentials. A little tip here would be, if you're using traditional network shares like in a NAS or something, you might need to type workgroup / in the username, both when you go to back it up and maybe even when you restore it, you might get some errors. In this case, it's a Windows account login. So the network share machine I'm backing up or restoring from is using Windows Microsoft account login, and you'll have to be aware of that for the username and password of the network share. But this could very well be a NAS, third party, it could even be Linux. Doesn't really matter as long as it has a network file sharing capability and a username and password for the folder you're trying to recover from. So I'm clicking next. It's now looking at what's on that network share that I showed you earlier. That 6.5 gig file, inspecting it, and it's going to offer me options for what I can do with that file as far as restoration. If we think about that for a minute, we should see two options. One is go back to the fresh Windows 10 install that had never even been rebooted. The other option would be, helps if I type in the right IP address. The other option would be the second backup I did. All right, so we have two restore points. Let's just click next on this screen. No need to select anything. There we go. We can select which moment in time. If I did the incremental, you'll see that Hello World folder. Actually, you won't, because I created it after doing the incremental. Either way, both of these is going to rewind the machine back in time to before that folder ever existed on the desktop. So I'm going to just go for the full restore of the initial install of Windows, the entire computer. It's that easy, right? 4 clicks of the mouse, I'm off to the races with a full bare metal restore happening. Didn't ask me any questions about partitioning or disk structure or any of that. It just handled it. And the new feature that is in 1.1 that was not there before has to do with restoring to a smaller volume. So that's a new feature to be able to restore to a drive, like maybe a smaller SSD you upgraded some old laptop to. You can now use Veeam Endpoint Backup free to restore to that newer small drive. So let me repeat that. That has nothing to do really with backup and protection of data. It has everything to do with giving a major speed boost to an old laptop at a loved one's house. Buy them a small SSD if they can fit easily their, let's say, 50 gig of data from the last few years, and you buy a 128 gig SSD, you can easily restore to it. It'll only be half full. Because right now maybe they have a spinny drive that's, maybe a quarter full but very slow. So this is another use case for Veeam restoring to a smaller drive. This particular video is just showing you restoring to a like-size drive. You saw this machine had 5 drives installed, labeled 0 through 4. Our Windows 10 was installed on the 4th drive. It didn't ask me any questions or obliterate some of my other drives that I don't want it to touch. It just knew, hey, there's the Windows 10. This person wants to restore. It knew to obliterate the correct 2 terabyte SSD that I use. Or actually, it shows 1.8 terabyte, right? In this screen, 1.8. But it's about 2 terabytes. And soon we'll be done with the restore. So I'm going to go ahead and get the video sped up until that point when the restore is done. Okay, that's it. In a little over 3 minutes is done. It's pretty darn fast. I'm going to go ahead and reboot. So I don't need to do anything special on this boot. Just let it boot from Windows 10. Okay, so we're finished restoring. It makes sense that it had to do Windows Update again because we rewound it in that moment in time before the reboot in Windows Update could take effect. So the folder is missing on our desk, as I predicted. You'll see the tray icon just showed up as the services were starting. And I promised you a look at memory and what this thing looks like running. Now CPU, once the machine is booted, extremely lightweight. As far as, just the tray icon sitting there. Now notice it doesn't show a history of backups because again, we rewound the machine. This is a little bit unusual. Normally you'd be restoring to some moment in time, probably a little after you first deployed Windows 10 on someone's machine. And if you do a Windows backup of Windows 8.1, then you upgrade them, and then you do another backup to Windows 10, just be aware because of change block tracking and the way it works, it will be another full backup needed, meaning it will take more time. How much time? Well, instead of a daily differential backup, when I say full, it'll look like this. You'll get a warning. Here's a machine that was backed up with Windows 8.1, and then it needed another full backup after I moved it to Windows 10. So this is the kind of warning you get, something about resetting change block tracking. Does the end user care or click on this? No, it's because I dove in and clicked on it and was curious. All right, so now we're doing a daily differential backup after restoring this machine. I told you we can dive into the weeds a little bit and look beyond just the CPU, where you're not going to see a whole lot from here. Very tiny. But these other services you might want to look at more closely. So Veeam Endpoint Backup does install some stuff. Before I get into Resource Manager and the services, let me show you what it looks like in programs and features. There you go. I told you this is a pristine machine with Windows 10 in there. I wasn't kidding. Then on today, August 11th, it installed Veeam Endpoint Backup, which comes along with these 3 runtimes. They are small, they're all bundled, and seem to have a low memory footprint and very low CPU utilization when you're not touching them, meaning only Veeam is using those runtimes. And again, let me just show you the CPU here. That is low. We just did a backup, and this machine barely noticed, and certainly a user doing something this machine wouldn't notice. In fact, it's so low, the gigahertz on the 2.4 capable turbo mode is backing way down to just save some watt burn. So it finished. If we click on this, you get a history of backups. 2 minutes, 28 seconds. So if you want to kind of geek out over some nerd stats there, you can, or you can just ignore it. Now, what else is there to look at? Well, I said resource monitor. So if you're looking at CPU, you can get a sense of what's going on, but not too much, and a little bit of Ethernet traffic here. Let's go to resource monitor for an even deeper dive. Okay, what can you see in resource monitor? Well, you can see who's hitting the disk, for instance. So who would be reading the disk at this moment in time as it decides what to do for a daily backup, if anything? That's what I'm attempting to show you. And I'm looking for who's the heavy hitter for reads. It's not really all that heavy a hitter, but it's this VSS VC. Okay, how about disk activity down here? Who's reading the disk? Veeam Endpoint Manager. And it looks like a volume shadow copy of some sort is being looked at. So for moment in time, to grab a moment in time, it's called the VSS service that's been around for years in Microsoft Windows operating systems. Many different backup companies can use that. And it sure appears that Veeam is doing that. Okay, and the backup is almost done. How about network? Probably too late to even see anything happening on the network. We'd want to look for who's sending out bits on the wire, and that would be the Veeam Endpoint service is the one that sent out some traffic. Back to CPU, sorting by CPU. Not much to say there. All these CPU cores, only one of them is lightly loaded. There's 8 physical cores with hyperthreading that turns into 16. So that's about it. I can try to show you memory. Say how much memory is committed. If you add up all these numbers about SQL Server, maybe 1 gig. That seems actually high to me. That might just be caching, or it might be because this machine has an insane amount of memory. You can see only 2 gig is being used by Windows 10 itself right now. So it's kind of nuts. So I think we're really looking at caching effects. We try to look at memory use. Okay, this is a better representation, KB. So I was way off the mark there. Maybe 1/5 of a gig of memory, something like that. 200 meg, I don't know. I have to add all those numbers up to get it right. So sorry about that, I misspoke. So very light footprint for using this product and just letting it wake up the machine. It can do a wake up job in the middle of the night, back up and put your laptop back to sleep. That's something I've been doing with Windows Server 2012 R2 Essentials, or Windows Home Server, what it was called before that, for years, 6+ years. The extended friends and families machines in various households are Hamachi VPN to my home, and they kind of wake up in the middle of the night. Well, not kind of wake up. They go to sleep when their humans that use them do. Don't touch them for 10 minutes. And at their scheduled hour in the middle of the night, they would wake up. Well, Veeam can do the same thing. So we picked 12:30 for this particular machine. If we're going to be backing up multiple machines overnight, I'd want to stagger those times a little bit so they're not all hitting the server at the same time to possibly get a little better overall performance. So this video is really focused on its abilities working on Windows 10. You'll want to check out this super guide to go through all the good stuff, including prior videos that have been published. Let me show you. So searching my channel, you'll see there's a number of looks here, and including some extensive testing on this one. So that concludes this video. Hopefully you found it helpful, and I thank you for visiting tinkertry.com and for watching this video.